Good afternoon and welcome to the Full Scottish here on Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Scott Bevan and I am joined today by former Senior Manager and HR Director Peter Curran and by actress Libby McArthur. Hello to you both.
Hi,
Hello
Scott.
there, Scott.
Hi there. We are going to start this afternoon's programming with the coronavirus update. 2,317 new confirmed cases we have been made aware of COVID-19. 4 new reported deaths have been registered of people who have tested positive. As of 10 a.m. today, 3,970,026 people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 2,954,776 have received their second dose. 517 people were in hospital with recently confirmed COVID-19 cases, 49 of whom were in intensive care. Since the start of the pandemic, a total of 327,652 people in Scotland have tested positive for COVID-19. 7,800 patients who tested positive have sadly died from the illness. So, moving on then to what we are going to discuss today, beginning with the easing of restrictions from July the 19th in Scotland to level 0. This is in line with the same date of easing of restrictions, slightly further easing of restrictions, of course, in England. The level 0 restrictions will now include a reduction to 1 metre in all indoor public settings for social distancing and indeed outdoor settings. Informal social gatherings of up to 15 people from 15 households are now allowed. Gatherings of up to 10 people from 4 households will be permitted indoors with the 1 metre physical distancing. Also, under 12s will no longer count towards the number of households that can gather indoors in public spaces and homes. Hospitality settings can open until midnight if their current licensing permits that, and customers will no longer be required to pre-book a 2-hour slot to go to a pub or restaurant, but will still be required to provide contact details to assist, test and protect. Up to 200 people now will be able to gather at weddings and funerals. Employers are asked still to continue to support home working where possible until we move beyond level 0, which we are hoping is going to happen on August the 9th. Nicola Sturgeon has come out and said, Libby, that the Delta variant is a game changer. If it's such a game changer, then why are we still going ahead with the easing of restrictions at the moment, do you think?
Well, it's funny. It's like I wish I could find out why these names Delta, Beta. You know, uh, what's the one that can escape the vac the most? Is it the Beta that's in
The
France
beta one,
just
the
now?
beta one in France currently, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know, Scott? It's funny when my son's very up in all the facts and figures, and he quite often sends me a message, and it's about a kind of death toll or figures or the new rules, and I think often that the balance in life around something like this is something we really need to be quite serious about weighing it all up. I think it's brilliant that we're going to the zero, the naught. But I do think that in Scotland we are in a different position from England, and I think that I wouldn't trust any one of the Tories as far as I can throw them, and I've got sound reasons for why I think they're kind of despicable in terms of their core beings. So therefore, in terms of leadership, I don't take them seriously. But in terms of the facts and figures, I think for me, and when I read this stuff and I hear the stuff and I'll listen to my son or get the information that you've just read out, I kind of want to put it up on a shelf a wee bit and then zoom out and look at us human beings, as we poor fragile human beings, and ask ask how we're doing in the face of all of this, because at the end of the day, I know that the Scots and the English are the same people, but I know that in our nation there's a different setup around COVID, and I think it's a better one. And I feel so sorry for England at the moment with him being the way the way that the government is just now. I think they are gung ho. It's funny. It makes me think. I don't know how you feel about this, Peter, or you, Scott, but it makes me think about that time last summer in 2020 when we talked about. I think it was about end of May, beginning of June, where we were talking about being at zero figures, and there was a call to close the border. And I remember being very nervous about that, because I know what the ramifications of that would be had Scotland, had made that decision, had our First Minister made that decision. But at the same time, we wouldn't be here now with all these deaths, But anyway, I mean, I like to think of everyone above Surrey as a northerner, so that's the way. I'd take the border right down past London to Surrey if I had my way.
Is it a decision you think that could still be made? Because, of course, cases are rising in England at the moment, and the Delta variant is running rampant, and they are falling in Scotland. Is it a decision that could still be taken at some point, do you think?
I hope not, in a strange way, because as much as I'm a very pro-independent Scotland, I think that one of the things that I feel very strongly about is getting over to people that when Boris Johnson is pulled up by the Speaker in the Westminster Parliament for speaking about the Scottish National Party as nationalists, people really need to understand why that is so important. The party that I support at the moment has policies that are no more nationalistic than flying the air. And I know that if the borders were closed for whatever reason, that would just be such fantastic fuel for anyone who considers Scottish independence being anything to do with nationalism.
Yeah. Peter, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak were pinged on their app to say that they were supposed to. I'm sorry, Peter. Are you still with us?
Yes.
Oh, you are. Oh,
Good.
fantastic. Sorry, apologies there. I thought we had a little technical snafu, but it's fine. They've been pinged on their app to say that, they were to self-isolate and claimed that they weren't going to do so. But have now U-turned on that and said that they will, in fact, self-isolate. But even the suggestion that they thought, well, we're not going to follow these rules, we're going to create our own rules for ourselves. Does that show that they're still not taking this virus seriously?
Well, clearly they shouldn't have done that, Scott. But I see that as a bit of a side. It's an important one in the message it sends. I mean, the real heart of the matter was the one being addressed by Libby. I mean, I think Boris Johnson is a lying, expedient, incompetent old Etonian who has surrounded himself by a group of people who closely mirror his own personality. In spite of that, I recognise the fact that he is trying to say, however badly, to save the lives, careers, economy, income of people, including a hell of a lot of people I love, a large chunk of my family. So I have to say, I want the man to be able to do well. I don't want any expedient party thing to criticise Boris or Rich or seize on the last embarrassing little thing. I mean, and I think Libby was getting to the heart of that. The problem, not only as Scotland and Britain, but as Europe and the world, is that the variant has all the qualities that our politicians don't have. And the two key ones, it has the ability to adapt very rapidly and act fast and see the vulnerabilities of its opponents and go for the throat. And we've got generations of politicians who've been able to engage in short-termism, offload and outsource their thinking to experts who they then think they're free to ignore. These are the problems that are are facing it. So I want Boris to be successful. I do recognise that the virus, horrific in its impact though it's been, is doing untold damage to other aspects of our society, to our mental health, to our economy, to the very health service itself. And it's actually creating medical crisis and killing people. So I want them to do well on it. But I think this reopening is misconceived in archetypal Boris fashion. He was desperately looking for a soundbite, and he found it in Freedom Day. Well, freedom to do what? It was a freedom we all have to have. We can go and jump off the nearest bridge when we're pissed off for life. It's not much of a freedom, but it's one that's there. I watched with utter horror on Andrew Marr today, the Labour Party's apology for a spokesperson who managed not to answer a single question, to get indignant about being asked very basic questions. Do you support what this government is doing? If not, what the hell are you going to do about it? He had no answers. He went into a pure electoral mode. So it's hard not to be infinitely depressed at the calibre of our politicians, but we, in the widest sense, we put them there. And we have to take our share of that responsibility. So I'm very worried about the Delta variant, by the way. The World Health Association has designated it as a variant of extreme concern. This is a South African variant. And we don't know what other variants are around the corner. I mean, there's an old saying, if you want to make God laugh, tell him what your plans are. And I'm an atheist, so I don't believe there's a God handling all this. But if there was, if he has any sense of amusement about millions of these creatures dying, he would laugh at the idea that we could have adequate plans to deal with it. We can only react, and that's what we're doing badly in many cases.
Yeah, Libby, 1,200 scientists have signed a letter to the British government saying that it's an unethical experiment and it's a threat to the world in opening up so soon. You mentioned the beta variant earlier on. People who are coming back from France will still have to self-isolate from the 19th of July when a lot of these restrictions are easing for 10 days. Do you think that this is something that's going to be with us for a very long time, or can we nip it in the bud now and hopefully the vaccine will see us through?
Yeah, I mean, just to stay in that incredible tone that Peter just set there about, but zooming out from all of us together on this planet, I often think about leadership, and that includes, the politicians that we're all listening to and the scientists that we're listening to. And for me, it'll always be the case that the grassroots common sense will be the thing that seeds up the best way forward. And it's all about empowering ourselves and each other, not with delegating our power away to these guys. Certainly embracing what we can in terms of information. But one of the things I think we're not talking about, Scott, is a general sense of well-being. And one of the things that I think has been really important for me over the last 18 months is pulling focus onto where we are looking after each other. I think the virus has got a lot to teach us. And I love that analogy that Peter did with, it's got these skills that if only our leadership did have, I'm sure Boris Johnson, like Peter said, could find twice as many scientists saying, herd immunity is the way forward. But I think herd immunity gives the game away as well, because, again, like Peter said, we've actually got to look at a mentality that's amongst the decision makers, and it is scary when the Etonians, who basically I'm beginning to understand now in my elderly part of life, that there really are people in charge who do not care about a whole swathe of society, who are happy that they either live in extreme poverty, eat out of food banks, and indeed die by any kind of beta, delta, call it whatever you like, the idea of herd, it's exactly the same kind of terminology as the swarm of migrants. It's realising that we really need to start caring. We really need to start caring about people we don't know, about children over the pond that we've never met. And, we really need to start acting, I mean, I'm not a religious person at all, and I'm not a Buddhist, but I completely agree with all the sentiments Peter said, who's a self-declared atheist, that there is only one of us here, and we all have to start looking after each other, It's funny that the virus has got a lot of fear around it, and one of the things I think that we need to remember is that cortisone levels will kill off your immune system, faster than anything else, We really need to start looking to all the positive things. I think the reason the shadow's so strong just now is because the light's stronger. There's a lot of amazing sharing going on just now about well-being and about seeding up, a kind of grassroots self-awareness and self-empowerment that's going on, that I think is the way to go.
Yeah, it's a very poetic way of putting it. On the topic of taking care of one another on the planet, then we've got a lot to discuss with regards climate change. Of course, there's been the terrible flash flooding in Germany and Belgium that has claimed a lot of lives, 180 at least in Germany, and also I think 27 so far in Belgium. Also, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands have been affected by these floods as well. This is something which, if not directly created by climate change, and it is perhaps the case, but even if it's not, is being exacerbated by the effects of climate change, isn't it, Libby?
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny. Whenever I hear folk talking and they say things like, "We're not sure if it's climate change," I know it's climate change.
Yeah.
I could have told you 10 years ago. I used to say to my pals, meteorologists must all be meeting up in secret, kind of going, "Psst, when are we going to tell them? When are we going to tell them what's happening?" We've still gone a bit mad, And it's not something we don't know about, it's not something we don't understand, It's like they talk about, these floods being extremely unusual. Yeah, of course they're extremely unusual because we're seeing them now because of what we've done, but they're also on the increase, and though that language means that they will soon be usual. Oh my goodness, there's something happening. It's been happening for quite a long time. Very proud that Glasgow's got COP26 happening. I'm very
Yeah.
excited about that. And I think everybody understands we need to ASAP get into neutral emissions, but let's be clear about what's going on and why we're in this situation. We're in this situation because of greed, no other reason. We're in this situation because we do not look after each other, because some people if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, take everyone with you. Sometimes I think we should go back to the indigenous civilizations and just learn from them. We need to go back in terms of our, gathering up what's important, starting to kind of like understand the nature of the responsibility and accountability for planet Earth. And we've lost the plot around that.
Yeah. Peter, the floods in the Rhineland-Palatinate area that have been so devastating and beyond, and of course the forest fires that we're seeing in America at the moment as well, all these things point to the fact that climate change is not something in the abstract that's for the future. It's something that's happening and affecting us now, isn't it? And what do you think that we can do at COP26, in order to make some changes and ensure that we survive these next sort of few decades?
Well, I'll come to that in a second, if I may, Scott. Can I just say that the most marked reaction to this that struck home to me about these floods was the fact that the intensity, I'm quoting here, the intensity and scale of the floods in Germany this week have shocked climate scientists who did not expect records to be broken this much over such a wide area this soon. In other words, these are the real experts who've been arguing the consequences, and what we were seeing was a manifestation of climate change, who have been predicting what some people said were panic-stricken timescales, which are ridiculous. It's now beginning to look as if we don't have that much time. So what is going to put a bomb under COP? I don't know. Such rudimentary Latin as I remember from school, because I left at 15 to pursue a career as a butcher's boy for 3. But there's an old Latin saying, post hoc ergo propter hoc, meaning if something happens after something else, it must have been caused by it. I mean, to give you a roughly equivalent example, if Nicola defected to the Labour Party the day after First Minister's questions, somebody would say, that's because she wore a red dress yesterday. So there is a difficulty in seeing things like that. This is no doubt, I'm totally with Libby. The point at which highly intelligent people become credulous, in other words, gullible, is exactly the point that ordinary people become skeptical and say, hey, wait a minute, Jimmy, this is all bloody obvious. If I can see it, why can you not see it? So we do need to revisit some of these fundamentals. But we're in the grip of a terrifying phenomenon of short-termism among politicians. I mean, that's why the European Union was so fascinating, because they had to achieve most things, consensus among 28 countries. And they're working hard on this at the moment, and actually are doing more than anybody else to focus it. But even they are having the minority of 4 or 5 countries who are saying, no, think of what this means for us immediately, what it means for our economy right now. Are we to do this? And it's all very well for you developed states to say, cut back in this, cut back in that. You've made your money and you've set your infrastructure. And we are developing states. We've got to go through all the stages you have of mining fossil fuels and poisoning the planet to get to your stage. What Boris would laughingly call levelling up. We haven't got time. We're supposed to be dangerously close to the 10 years being. That 10 years is beginning to look more like 7 or 6. It takes some people in their deliberations years to come to a simple conclusion. So I'm sorry to be negative, but what can they do? They have to radically clamp down on industry. Government must govern, and they have to say, we must do this regardless of the short-term economic consequences. We must do it or we'll die.
Yeah. Well, of course, you said... Yeah, of course, we said 10 years, 2 years ago. So we should now be at 8. And after that point, it's a runaway effect, isn't it? And you can't stop the breakdown of the climate. And we've already seen, how much it impacts... already in the Rhineland, we've had huge, what looks like sinkholes being created, by earthquakes as well as the floods. It's all kind of coming to a head at the same time. 114,000 households were without power. Thousands have been made homeless. A regional government spokesperson for the area said the mobile network has collapsed, the infrastructure has collapsed, hospitals can't take any more in, nursing homes had to be evacuated. At the same time, we've got 241,000 acres of forestry burning in Oregon, which is about the size of New York City, burning over there. So are people going to wake up now and realise that this is something that needs to be addressed, not tomorrow, but now?
Well, that's the question, Scott. Are people going to wake up? The term emerged over very recent times, recent years, woke, a favourite one to be invoked by GB News. But in its original concept, it was the people awaking to the realities and the urgencies and the priorities of life as it is now and doing something about it.
Yeah.
But I go back, as I do again and again, to the old socialist couple, the Webbs, who George Bernard Shaw says to them, surely you believe in government by the people. And the Webbs, lifelong socialists, inventors of much of the theory, said, of course we don't believe in government by the people. We believe of government of the people by governments they selected. So we need to govern. I mean, this is a war. I mean, when Hitler invaded Poland, Britain immediately was ill-equipped to do it, but mobilized everything to fight it. And a whole set of liberties went out the window and people readily accepted it. I grew up during that war. When you're faced with a massive challenge, you've got to govern. Now, I'm not arguing for autocratic government, but we haven't time for the dribblings and ditherings of politicians scoring petty political points. We're on a planet that's dying, and it's our fault, and we still can do something about it. So how do we waken the people up? Extinction Rebellion, that's an example of wakening the people up, a massive impact. And what did people say? I was trying to get to work yesterday. It's all the fault of that wee lassie who put people lying down in the street. Stop! I was 10 minutes late for work. Aye, all right, hen, but you might not get to work if your arse was burned off by bloody falling trees and flames around you. How do we do that? This is where the arts are so vital. The arts can make an impact. They can make an impact in a song. They can make an impact in a phrase. They can make an impact in a play. We've got to get through to the people, and you don't get through to the people by masses of statistics and long, boring debates, which I hope this one isn't. You get through to the people by displaying passion and commitment, and then saying, I'll get behind politicians who have the power to do something about it, and I'll accept a radical restriction of my own liberties to permit that to happen.
Yes. Well, the EU is producing a plan in order to try and cut greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. We've reported on that this week a couple of times. Part of the proposals are to incentivize companies essentially to do the right thing by further taxes, by making things more expensive. This, of course, could be passed on, could it not, Libby, to consumers as well? And is it going far enough to say that, okay, we're going to plant some trees and we're going to incentivize companies to do the right thing by 2030, by 2050? Is it all a little bit too little, too late?
Yeah, good question, Scott. I just really want to acknowledge the wisdom from Peter. It's so powerful. In answer to your question, Scott, just on that planting the tree thing, I really, inspired by Peter, want to zoom this debate right out and suggest that, an idea doesn't leave its source. The seed grows up, whatever the seed was planted, and you can't change direction after that. You can't kind of go, oh, I meant it to be an oak tree, and look, it's a blooming ash, whatever. So for me, I think there is a way that we are now being asked, every single individual on this planet are being asked to kind of step up into a kind of godhead. And it's almost like we need to put all these problems, whether it be the pandemic or climate change, because there'll be more wake-up calls. They're en route. They're going to shake us all up. And if we actually were able to put all of this into a test tube over a Bunsen burner, for me, there really is only one issue here, and it's the issue of there is no hierarchy. We are all in this together, and we all need to start seeing each other with the same kind of divine spark as I see it. Here's a good, Peter, you'll enjoy this. Here's a good word, tapsultiri. It's a good Scottish word, and it just means topsy-turvy. And it seems to me that this tapsultiri is one of my favourites. And it seems to me that all our thinking at the moment is tapsultiri. The idea that we could actually kind of, fix the icing on the cake when the flour and the water's already gone rancid, So I think it is a spiritual dilemma, and I think it's about understanding the idea that the reason that Peter and I are interested in the grassroots empowering of all of us is because the truth is that people are good in the main, and oftentimes what happens when we get to that tip of the arrow, which is our leadership, what we're getting is the worst of our kind, not in terms of their intellect maybe, or in terms of their knowledge, in terms of their brain, but in terms of their heart and their soul. We have lost touch. You know, there's an old Indian tribe who would not make a decision unless they worked out how it would affect 7 generations in the future. And we really need to go back to that kind of thinking. Do you know, Peter, I love what you say about the arts, but I think it's in the care of our animals and in nature too, because in those areas, what we're looking to lose is labels. We're looking to smell the rose and not have to know anything about it. We're looking to understand that when you're with the dog doesn't care what your gig is. You know, when we're in nature, we understand there's only one of us here. And the arts are all about a return to love, as far as I'm concerned. They're all about losing the labels. For me, a great story told is when the label slips away and we understand that we're just the same. You know, that's what stories are for. They're to make us feel more joined, less lonely. And it's nature, it's the creatures, it's the care of the weak and the vulnerable that remind us who we actually are. You know, and we're all responsible for each other.
Scott, could I just pick up very quickly a point of Libby's before you move on? That word, Tapsel, the turnover word you used, Libby.
Theory. So the guys at the top who are supposed to be in leadership are letting us down. We need to actually start to turn it around.
Well, that used to be an old trade union maxim.
Tapsel theory.
Capitalism is a pyramid with the bosses at the top and the workers at the bottom. The union movement is an inverted pyramid with all the bosses at the top pressing down on the workers at the bottom. But I can just quote the words of an old comic turn that I used to tour with and did a wee bit of brief stage work with. He used to say, when your audience is dying and you're dying a death, stand on your horns and fall on your arse. That always works. So that was a form of turning yourself upside down. But I'm on. I had a quad bypass 11 years ago. And before I had the quad bypass, and I was dead for 6 minutes at one point, before the quad bypass, I would have happily swatted a fly. Now I'm incapable of killing any living thing. I catch spiders and put them humanely out the door, and I'm terrified I'm going to stand in a wee bog. I don't know what it is, but something united. It was a sense of my own mortality united me to nature.
Well, I mean, Libby
there's no hierarchy in nature.
Yeah, well, I mean, you expressed the sentiment there that people are essentially good, and I'm inclined to agree, but is it the people that are the problem, or is it the organisations that we create to advance ourselves, and the fact that they sort of run away from us, just as the climate crisis is running away from us? I mean, if we look at what the oil and gas companies are doing right now, they are actually putting money into carbon capture and trying to negate some of the damaging influence that they've had. But at the same time, oil and gas companies have put $250 million into lobbying governments to prevent any action on climate change just in the past year. So isn't that a bit hypocritical, Peter?
Absolutely. But again, I don't want to turn everything back to something I was saying, but other countries have harnessed their arts and their music and their culture for political identity and achieve political change. I mean, the contribution of people like Joan Baez and Bob Dylan to the American transformation in the 60s was enormous. The Chicanos, the Mexicans, but used their music as a political vehicle. Now, I'm not saying they don't still have problems, but that's a way of reaching the people. I mean, you could spend your life pointing out irrelevancies and saying, look at this, what can we do about it? Boris Johnson is simply a particularly lethal variant of the Tory virus. It gets you nowhere. It gets you nowhere, Sly. The BBC are wicked. It's all the fault of the BBC. we've got to get back down to give people a grassroots political sense. Now, in Britain, that was always done. It used to be done by the old Play for Today and by the arts and by dramatic workshop. That's where to get to the hearts and the head of the people. I mean, I was trying to explain to Pilar Fernandez, the Galician activist, what I thought was different about Scots. And yes, it can be dismissed as exceptionalism and all that nonsense. And I said they have an intelligent heart. Their heart and their head at their best are one organism. They work together, but they're inseparable. You can't address the head without addressing the heart, and you can't address the heart without addressing the head. And we haven't found the trick, because we have, I have to say, a race of politicians at the moment, including Holyrood, who's stuffed to the gills with them, who are worthy, good people in many respects. Virtually all of them have a charisma bypass. They don't seem to have the capacity to really engage. Alex Salmond did have it. Now, I'm not going to get into the Alex Salmond or the Alba thing, because it raises all sorts of problems for me in the debate. But Alex Salmond undoubtedly, at a point in time, had charisma. Robin Cook in his time had charisma. There was a whole range of people. They had something. Even Blair, God damn him, rather than bless him, at a point in the game had charisma and could talk to the people. So, unfortunately, charisma seems to be gifted to the populists or the most lethal, like the Trumps of this world, or the Farages, if you could call his brand of it for charisma. So I've got no easy answers, Scott, but yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that could be a presentation of charisma by the media and by the powers that be, though, rather than natural charisma itself? So they train in order to present themselves in a certain way, and then that's amplified by the media giving them the exposure, etc. Whereas there are plenty of people full of charisma who will never get that opportunity because they don't fit the correct narrative, if you like. Do you think that's possibly one of the reasons?
Yeah. Can I just say, just what Peter was saying there, I thought was brilliant, and I think we should look at America, and we should look at, what's happening in London, and in terms of, the kind of, the cartoon catalyst energies that are in our planet at the moment, it's the kind of, I think what Peter's talking about, Scott, is not the kind of, learned charisma. We know Thatcher went and, she was trained up, and, all these guys get these guys turning up, telling them how to speak and what to say, and to lose the or whatever it is. I think there's something about the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves that's the way forward here. And, I have an Airbnb room, and I quite often say to people who have never been to Scotland, or indeed never been to Glasgow before, tell me what you know about this nation of ours. And it's quite interesting, the stories I get back once they've been here for a while. And I think we cannot underestimate the sophisticated nature of something like the friendliness of the Glaswegian. It's one of the most sophisticated ways to be friendly. And I mean friendly to strangers. I don't mean friends to your friends, which is another thing altogether. And I think that the Scots do have a mentality that is about community. I really believe that. And I don't, like you say, Pete, you're always a wee bit nervous when you start talking like that, as if we're all a wee bit brigadoon about it. But it's not. It's about what I was taught by my parents, and everyone in my back court that I hung about me in Castlemilk were all taught the same thing. And it was about the idea that you actually have to have an expectation of yourself being someone who will show up for others, because it's shameful not to be that way. And I don't think the Scots really understand that that's in with the blood with us, in a way that it's not. When I meet a lot of my American friends and stuff, and things happen here, they're amazed that, I'll get up from a table of 4 to let to let 4 people sit down, and we'll move to the table of 2. Because that would never happen in New York City. It's shameful to move tables for other people. That would be, how dare they ask? How dare they think you would move? Anyway, for me, there's something about the Scottish story which has embroiled into the bones of it, boiled into the bones of it. The seed grows up, that there is such a thing as community. Thatcher was talking rubbish when she talked about there's no such thing as society. And any thinking that is against that, any thinking that goes against that, as far as I'm concerned, is the road to destruction.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we could spend another half an hour, another 2 3 hours talking about climate change, but we do have other things as well on the agenda that are almost as important, if not equally as important. And one of those, of course, is Priti Patel's plans to push forward the Nationality and Borders Bill. This is designed essentially to ensure that asylum seekers are no longer coming into this country in the way that they were. Is this something which shows the Conservative Party up as the nasty party, as the SNP have once again pointed out? Do you think, Libby?
I think. Sorry, there's a bit of me that kind of is lost for words when I think about like you said earlier on, the short thinking, Scott, the tiny wee thinking that goes on here. The reason that folk are flying over the world, fleeing over the world, is escaping, is our story. It's the world is getting smaller, and the notion that we can get away with this any longer is coming to roost. We actually have to start to look after each other. I'm so proud of Scotland for being, and I don't know if anyone's noticed, but do you know that everyone's moving to Scotland? Are we getting this? Are we getting that that it's not asylum seekers just coming here? There's lots of people trying to create this nation, for the better, and they're coming from London, and they're coming from America, and they're coming from Europe, and they're coming in their droves. I think we need to keep looking after each other, and I think Priti Patel is an infant when it comes to her soul charisma. She doesn't even understand the idea of proper connection or reaching out or understanding or empathy. We really need to start looking after each other. So yeah, I'm not at all surprised that this is another Tory policy. Not surprised in the least. I mean, that is their mentality. Their mentality is up the ladder and pull it up behind you.
Yeah,
So
they plan to create offshore detention centres for asylum seekers, which
it's terrifying. It's terrifying, honestly.
I mean, it's been.
My God.
They've been accused
Even
by.
your heart out.
Yeah, they've been accused by, as you say, lots of people of pulling the ladder up behind them, and also of showing callousness towards migrants. The Red Cross said, as MPs begin to work on the bill, we urge them to remember that behind a term like refugee or asylum seeker is a person who simply wants to live safely, have the chance to rebuild their life, and contribute to communities. Peter, do you think that after the Windrush scandal, would it not have made more sense for the UK government to say we are going to end this policy of the sort of the policies that are preventing people from coming into the country and building a life here? Do you not think in the wake of Brexit, in the wake of Windrush, it would have been advantageous to them politically, if nothing else, to say that we are going to go back on that and start showing a bit more compassion with what we're trying to do?
Yeah, and it would be nice if they all put flowers in their hair and danced in the daisies and kissed every asylum seeker. But it's not going to happen. This is the Home Office, the legendary repository of the most antediluvian attitudes about people there are. I mean, The Guardian, as so often put it in a nutshell, Daniel Trilling in The Guardian said, Priti Patel's border bill is designed to look tough but not solve any real problems. This government's all about show. It's all about sound bites. Asylum claims in the UK are historically low. These punitive measures will only force more people into legal limbo. They're actually creating the horror they don't want. But let's start and go back to the early themes that Libby developed and triggered me often about trying to see this a wee bit more objectively than in the Tories are evil demons, which I secretly believe they are, but let's move away from it. And say any government, by the nature of being a state, by the nature of having a border, you are saying, I will exercise control about who can live, work, and be a member of this state. You can't have societies are created to do just that. They're not created to be wide open and say all the world. I mean, the only country in the world that ever said, let me take your huddled masses, was the early American state, desperate at the end of the 19th century to get immigration. They probably set up Ellis Island to who was coming in. So states will behave in that. And an independent, totally independent Scotland will exercise border control, citizenship control, and immigration control. I mean, as Libby says, everybody's coming to Scotland. If everybody does come to Scotland, of course, we're too wee to hoard them all. You've got to face certain realities. So what can they do? Well, it's the overarching... Yeah, sorry, I'll stop.
Sorry, is that true though, Peter? Because of course we have a declining population here in Scotland, and we have lots of space, particularly in the Highlands. Is it true that we can't take lots of new people in? The hostile environment policies that the Tory government are heavily involved in is something that even the Scottish Tories don't want a part in.
Well, yeah, we've got 8 acres of space to do what? I mean, what we're going to do is say to them, right, well, get all your wagons hitched up and we'll let you ride into the vacant spaces north of the Forth and you can all claim your land. There would be instant screams of horror. There are people alive and well, if you can describe them in that way, in the Scottish National Party support, who are happy to say only people born and bred in Scotland should be allowed to have any citizenship. There's a whole series of bampots that would go mad if we released immigration. Nicola, I can have issues with Nicola about timidity and over political caution, but our caution in some respects is entirely well placed, as it has been during the present pandemic. So it's a question of being rational and saying, if you want to be a part of this society, 2 things must be satisfied. One, that we believe you genuinely want to come here, and if you have an urgent, pressing need, like asylum, to come here, we'll do our very best to accommodate you if we can. The second one is you must show some evidence of how you're going to become a productive member of that community. I mean, to take it to its extreme, which is often the only way to explore an argument. If you say to an asylum seeker, you can only come here if you've got £100,000 in the bank and a career or a family that's going to engage in productive careers you're going to engage in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, moving on then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely understand, absolutely agreed. But we're going to have to move on because we are running out of time, and we'll move on to GB News now then. GB News received 0 viewers at one point last week after a presenter took the knee in support of Black Lives Matter during the England game, and there was a movement by its right-wing support to boycott, and they received 0 viewers, and their viewers are, if you like, on their knees, the viewing figures. It's nice to know that at times we actually have more viewers than GB News. That's quite good. But is this something that we could see happening, Peter? Is this something that I mean they're now saying that they're going to have Nigel Farage doing a nightly news program or a nightly some sort of program anyway on GB News. Is this something that the viewers are going to like, do you think, those who still view it?
Well, the reason this is happening to GB News is at least on this particular story as it has emerged, is not the efforts of good people, it's the efforts of bad people who think they were becoming too woke, too liberal, too tolerant of other viewpoints. This is not what they signed up to GB News for. They wanted the Bamports channel to emit Bamportery of the most extreme form by the day. So yes, they will want a great influx of even more Bamports, and that will all ultimately consign it to the boot. But there's always the danger that if it does what Andrew Neil said it wasn't supposed to do, turn into Fox News, if it does turn into an extremist version of Fox News, there are sadly a large block of the electorate, many of them who were traditional Labour supporters, who will love it. The innately racist, the innately insular, the innately don't give a shit about anybody else. What's the old song that they used to sing? The working class can kiss my ass. I've got the foreman's job at last. All these people will love GB News.
Yeah. Have they abandoned any pretense now then of being a sort of centre right platform? Is it for the hard right now? Is that essentially what they're setting out to say, Libby?
Well, I think we would be the powers that be would try and convince us that these Bamports that Pierre speaks about are in the majority. And one of the reasons I talk about the Tapsultiri, grassroots level kind of stuff about empowering people is because they're not in the majority, and that's one of the things we need to remember. And why I think we should be more worried about the Jeremy Vine show than GB News. I mean, I always think when I listen to that, I think, where did he find these guys? They're so right wing, and it's so I think there's a
lift
bit
up
of
whetstones.
yeah. Well, see, I watched a terrible film last night called Contagion that got 5 stars. And when I say it was a terrible film, it was made in 2011. And the idea basically was the scary thing was that it was so like COVID. But in this film, people are elbowing each other and battering each other and and fighting for vaccines and climbing over pharmacies. And we would be told by the powers that be that we are in a destroy or be destroyed world. We're against the vaccine, destroy or be destroyed. At the moment, the story that's out there, whether it be a soap opera or, a film or a movie or anything, is destroy or be destroyed. And I totally agree with Peter. We need to write a new story. And all of us need to understand that we do want to look after each other in our deepest motivation. So for me, the story is who's rescuing who. And that brings in everything, the climate change, the border stuff, the COVID stuff. We really need to start telling the story who's rescuing who, because when you're rescuing you.
Yeah. Well, on the topic of the media, we also have to talk about Channel 4. Channel 4 is set to be privatised. Channel 4 is a channel that exists and sustains itself through primarily advertising, isn't it, Libby? So why is it now that it's being insisted upon that it be privatised and it be owned by a company coming in and buying it? Because it wasn't initially supposed to be there to make a profit, was it?
Well, it's funny you saying that, Scott, because I had a wee dinner party in the garden the other night, and I was saying that, I remember when Channel 4 started, and I remember talking to Stuart Cosgrove about it. I remember being so excited. I was on the tube in my old girl band. We were on the tube with Jules Holland. What I actually said, I don't understand what's happening. How can Channel 4 be privatised? I don't understand how that could happen. I thought. And so it seems, again, capitalist, it's the folk that have the biggest shares have been bought and sold by the sound of it.
Yeah.
And it's funny when I think about Jon Snow, there was only one time I felt annoyed at Jon Snow, and he was talking to Nicola Sturgeon at the time. And I thought, John, why don't you recognise who she is? Why are you being so, but yeah, Channel 4 News is the only news I would watch. And are we all going to start doing what I'm doing, which is we're going to stop watching the news and try and find other outlets?
Well, yes, other outlets, for example, Broadcasting Scotland. But,
I've got
this is the thing. Channel 4 was initially set up during Margaret Thatcher's government in 1982, wasn't it, to provide an alternative to the BBC. So it's not as if it was set up as some sort of left-wing radical news channel and programming. It wasn't, and it isn't. So what is the issue that the government seem to have in terms of wanting to sell it off and want to make sure that it's bought up by somebody? And who do you think's going to buy it up, Peter?
As to who's going to buy it up, I don't know. It's certainly a worrying thought. Why are they doing it? They're doing it because Channel 4 turned into what the BBC, at least in respect of its news coverage, what the BBC should have been, an effective public service broadcaster. And the people that have run Britain since the dog days of the empire, the last thing in the world that they want is an independent broadcaster, a public service broadcaster. I get more information from PBS America, often showing programs that were made in Britain that never saw the light of day in the BBC. Because it does function as a public service broadcaster. That their programs, in fairness, did appear in the BBC. One they've been running recently is a must view for anybody that's interested in how an independence movement progresses. Not because of that we want to take that route, as the one about the 1916 Rising and a whole series of warts and all documentaries of how they got it wrong, how it happened, the heavy price they paid for it. I, at the moment, am relying on Private Eye to tell me how rotten the UK really is, which it documents. It knows nothing about Scotland. I'm relying on Channel 4 News, and I'm relying on The Guardian, which has flaws, but is still the repository of... Sorry?
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't have control over broadcasting in Scotland, so it's not something that the Scottish Government or Scotland can do an awful lot about. But the BBC is now being run by a former Tory candidate. Channel 4 is being privatised, and we've got GB News as well. Starting channels like this here on Broadcasting Scotland, is this the way to fight back, essentially, do you think, Libby?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally in keeping with my ethos of the grassroots thing. Just to remember, we've been told a lie about all these half truths masquerading as whole truths that folk want to look after their own, and what's wrong with making sure your kids gone private, and what's wrong with and everybody would do, and you'd do the same if you were me. No, I wouldn't. It's that sociopathic mentality which basically goes, it's shameless to behave in this way. We need to all start looking after each other. We need to run the story, who's rescuing who. It's the antidote to destroy or be destroyed.
Well, thank you very much, both to Peter Curran and Libby McArthur for that programme today. I think it was very interesting and informative and enlightening, and I enjoyed the discussion. So, thank you.
Thanks, Libby. Thanks, Scott.
If you support an alternative, thank you very much. If you support an alternative to privatised news organisations and you want to help us out, then please do go to the website and sign up. Or if you can contribute in any way to our crowdfunders, then please consider doing that. We can only do what we do here at Broadcasting Scotland thanks to your generous support. So thank you very much, and have a very good rest of your day.